Welcome to Miss Scarlett. Subscribe and don't miss out on Patreon. Have fun! As the cold, frigid breeze of the Himalayas caressed Theo's skin, he embarked on his ascent towards the revered temple nestled amidst the peaks. He had exchanged the cacophony of urban existence for this remote sanctuary, searching for tranquility and solace from his hectic corporate career. Nepal's natural splendor unfolded around him, a rugged embrace unlike the concrete jungle he had known. Upon reaching the temple, its weathered facade told tales of years past, its carvings illuminated by the amber glow of dusk. Stepping into the hushed sanctuary, Theo inhaled the refreshing air, a marked difference from the arduous trek. Shadows danced within. Faint candlelight flickered, casting a mystical ambiance across the hallowed space, infusing it with the gentle aroma of incense. With reverence, he lowered his head, his copper locks forming a curtain over his eyes. His fingers intertwined in a gesture of prayer, a ritual of contemplation foreign to him, yet fitting within these sacred walls. He murmured, then paused. What did he truly want? His mind drifted to his struggles at work, his difficulty connecting with others, especially women. I wish I could understand women better, he finally said, feeling a bit foolish even as the words left his lips. A gentle breeze whispered through the temple, causing the candle flames to dance. Theo shrugged off the odd feeling that settled over him and made his way back to the retreat center, unaware of the changes that awaited him. The next morning, Theo's eyes fluttered open, his body feeling strangely different. He stretched, frowning at the unfamiliar sensations. As he sat up, a long lock of auburn hair fell over his shoulder. No, not his shoulder. Her shoulder. Theo's heart raced as she looked down at her transformed body. Soft curves replaced the angular lines she'd known all her life. She stumbled to the mirror, gasping at the reflection that greeted her. A woman with delicate features and wide, startled eyes stared back. "This can't be happening," she whispered, her voice higher and softer than before. Theo. Or was it Esme now? The name seemed to appear in her mind unbidden, touched her face, tracing the unfamiliar contours. Esme's mind reeled as she tried to make sense of her situation. The wish at the temple, had it somehow caused this? She shook her head, auburn tresses swaying with the movement. This was impossible. And yet, here she was. A knock at the door startled her.
Theo, are you all right? We're gathering for morning meditation in 10 minutes.
A voice called. Panic gripped Esme. How could she explain this? She couldn't just walk out there looking like this. I'm not feeling well, she called back, wincing at her new voice. I think I'll stay in today. Do you need anything? Should I call a doctor? No, Esme replied hastily. I just need some rest. I'll be fine. As footsteps retreated from her door, Esme sank onto the bed, her mind racing. She needed to figure out what had happened and how to fix it. But first, she needed clothes that fit her new body. Rummaging through her suitcase, Esme found nothing suitable. Everything was too large, designed for her former male frame. She wrapped a blanket around herself and paced the small room, trying to formulate a plan. Hours passed as Esme grappled with her new reality. She practiced walking, getting used to her altered center of gravity. She experimented with her voice, learning its new range and timbre. As night fell, she made a decision. She couldn't stay here, hiding in this room. She needed to get back home and figure out how to reverse this change. Under cover of darkness, Esme slipped out of the retreat center, leaving behind a hastily scrawled note about a family emergency. She'd taken some cash from her wallet and little else, knowing her credit cards and ID would be useless now. The journey back to Kathmandu was a blur of anxiety and discomfort. Esme was acutely aware of how different the world felt from her new perspective. The way people looked at her, spoke to her, everything had shifted. In Kathmandu, she used her limited funds to buy some basic clothing, a simple blouse and skirt that at least fit her new form. As she changed in a small shop's dressing room, Esme caught sight of herself in the mirror. The auburn-haired woman looking back at her was a stranger, yet somehow familiar. Esme booked a flight home, using the excuse of a lost passport to explain why she had no identification. It was a tense journey, filled with half-truths and nervous smiles, but somehow she made it through. Back in her apartment, Esme collapsed onto her couch, exhaustion and confusion overwhelming her. She looked around at the masculine decor, the remnants of Theo's life, and felt a deep sense of disconnect. As the initial shock began to wear off, practical concerns set in. How would she explain this to her job, her friends, her family? Esme's head spun with the implications. The next morning, Esme stood in front of her closet, frowning at the array of men's clothing. None of it would do. She needed a new wardrobe, and fast. Her job at the marketing firm wouldn't wait forever. With a sigh, Esme grabbed her wallet and headed out. The department store felt like alien territory as she navigated the women's section. She ran her hands over silk blouses and pencil skirts, marveling at the textures. "Can I help you find anything?" a saleswoman asked, smiling warmly. Esme hesitated, then nodded. "I need everything. For work. I'm starting a new job." She lied, the words coming easier than she expected. The saleswoman's eyes lit up. "Oh, how exciting! Let's get you set up with a professional wardrobe." For the next few hours, Esme tried on more clothes than she'd ever worn in her life as Theo. She settled on a collection of silk blouses in various jewel tones, sleek pencil skirts, and a few pairs of tailored trousers. The saleswoman helped her select appropriate undergarments, a process that left Esme blushing furiously. As she paid for her purchases, Esme couldn't help but feel a small thrill. The clothes were beautiful, and part of her was curious to see how they'd look in a professional setting. Back at home, Esme practiced walking in heels, wincing at the pinch, but determined to master it. She experimented with makeup, following online tutorials with varying degrees of success. By the end of the day, she felt marginally more prepared to face the world as Esme. The next morning, Esme stood in front of her mirror, smoothing down her silk blouse. The deep green complemented her auburn hair, which she'd managed to style into a neat bun. The black pencil skirt hugged her new curves, ending just above her knees. She took a deep breath, straightened her shoulders, and headed out the door. At the office, Esme's heart pounded as she approached the reception desk. "Hello?" she said, trying to project confidence. "I'm Esme. Williams. I'm here to see HR." The receptionist smiled and directed her to the correct floor. In the elevator, Esme rehearsed her story. A cousin of Theo's, taking over his position due to his unexpected departure. It was flimsy, but it was all she had. To her surprise, the HR manager accepted her story with little question. Perhaps it was the confidence Esme had forced into her voice, or the professional appearance she'd cultivated. Whatever the reason, within an hour, she was seated at Theo's old desk, staring at the computer screen and wondering how on earth she was going to pull this off. "Esme, right?" a voice called. She looked up to see Mark, one of Theo's colleagues, smiling at her. "Welcome to the team. Let me know if you need any help getting settled." Esme smiled back, grateful for the kindness. "Thank you. I appreciate that." As the days passed, Esme found herself settling into a routine. The silk blouses and pencil skirts that had felt so foreign at first became a kind of armor, helping her navigate this new world. She threw herself into work, determined to prove herself capable. To her surprise, Esme found that she excelled in areas where Theo had struggled. Her presentations were more engaging, her client interactions smoother. She attributed it to the fresh perspective, the chance to start over without preconceptions. Weeks turned into months, and Esme's life took on a new rhythm. She made friends at work, went out for drinks with the other women in the office, and slowly built a life for herself. All the while, she researched ways to reverse the change, reaching out to experts in spirituality and mythology, but found no answers. One evening, as Esme was working late, Mark stopped by her desk. "Burning the midnight oil?" he asked, leaning against the cubicle wall. Esme looked up, brushing a stray lock of auburn hair behind her ear. "Just finishing up this proposal," she said, smiling. Mark nodded, his eyes warm.
"You've been doing great work, you know. The clients love you."
"Thank you," Esme replied, feeling a flutter in her stomach. She'd noticed Mark's attention over the past few weeks, and to her surprise, she didn't mind it.
"Listen,"
Mark said, rubbing the back of his neck. "I was wondering if you'd like to grab dinner sometime? Outside of work, I mean." Esme blinked, taken aback. Part of her wanted to say yes immediately, while another part panicked at the implications. Can I think about it?" she asked. Mark nodded, looking a bit disappointed but understanding. "Of course. No pressure. Have a good night, Esme." As he walked away, Esme leaned back in her chair, her mind whirling. She'd been so focused on trying to change back, on holding on to Theo, that she hadn't considered the possibility of embracing this new life fully. That night, Esme stood in front of her mirror, really looking at herself, the auburn hair that fell in waves past her shoulders, the curve of her hips in the silk nightgown she'd grown to love. She thought about the past months, the challenges she'd overcome, the friendships she'd formed, the confidence she'd gained. "Do I really want to change back?" she whispered to her reflection. The question haunted her over the next few days. Esme went through the motions of her daily routine, slipping on a purple silk blouse and charcoal pencil skirt, applying her now perfect makeup, striding into the office in her heels. But her mind was elsewhere, weighing the pros and cons of her situation. On Friday, Esme made a decision. She approached Mark's desk, her heart pounding. "About that dinner," she said, smiling as he looked up. "I'd love to, if the offer still stands." Mark's face lit up. "Absolutely. How about tomorrow night?" Esme nodded, a mix of excitement and nervousness bubbling in her chest. "Sounds perfect." The date was lovely. A cozy Italian restaurant, good wine, and easy conversation. As Mark walked her to her door at the end of the night, Esme felt a sense of rightness she hadn't expected. "I had a wonderful time," she said softly, looking up at him. Mark smiled, reaching out to tuck a strand of her auburn hair behind her ear.
"So did I,"
he murmured, leaning in slowly. As their lips met, Esme closed her eyes, letting herself sink into the moment. When they parted, she felt breathless and more certain than ever about her choice. Over the next few weeks, Esme's relationship with Mark blossomed. She found herself looking forward to their dates, to the gentle way he held her hand, to the sound of his laughter. At work, they maintained professionalism, but stolen glances and secret smiles made the days brighter. One sunny Saturday, Esme stood in front of her closet, rifling through her now extensive collection of feminine clothing. She and Mark were going to a charity gala, and she wanted to look perfect. Her hand landed on a silk gown in a deep, rich blue. As she slipped it on, the cool fabric sliding over her skin, Esme caught sight of herself in the mirror. The woman who looked back at her was confident, successful, and happy. The gown hugged her curves, the color making her auburn hair shine like fire. For the first time since her transformation, Esme felt no desire to change back. This was who she was now, not just on the outside, but on the inside too. She had grown into this life, this identity, in ways she never could have imagined. The gala was a whirlwind of music, champagne, and laughter. Esme moved through the crowd with ease, charming potential clients and making new connections. Mark stayed by her side, his hand a comforting presence on the small of her back. As they swayed together on the dance floor, Esme looked up at Mark, her heart full. "Thank you," she said softly. He looked at her quizzically. "For what?" Esme smiled, thinking of the journey that had brought her to this moment. "For seeing me," she replied. "For helping me see myself." Mark's arms tightened around her. "You're an amazing woman, Esme. I'm just glad I get to be part of your life." As the music swelled around them, Esme rested her head on Mark's shoulder, closing her eyes. She thought back to that day in the temple, to the wish that had changed everything. She had wanted to understand women better, and in the most unexpected way, that wish had been granted. Esme realized that she no longer saw her transformation as a curse or a mistake. It was a gift, a chance to live authentically, to experience life from a new perspective, to grow in ways she never could have as Theo. The months continued to pass, each day cementing Esme's new life further. She excelled at work, eventually earning a promotion to senior marketing strategist. Her relationship with Mark deepened, moving from casual dates to a committed partnership. One crisp autumn evening, Esme stood on the balcony of the apartment she now shared with Mark, looking out over the city. She wore a cozy sweater in a warm cinnamon color, her auburn hair loose around her shoulders. Mark joined her, wrapping his arms around her waist from behind.
"Penny for your thoughts?"
he asked, resting his chin on her shoulder. Esme leaned back into him, smiling. "I was just thinking about how much my life has changed in the past year, how much I've changed."
"For the better, I hope,"
Mark said, a hint of playfulness in his voice. Esme turned in his arms, looking up at him. "Definitely for the better," she said softly. "I never expected any of this, but I wouldn't change it for the world." Mark's eyes softened.
"I'm glad to hear that,"
he said, reaching into his pocket.
"Because I was hoping you might be open to one more change."
Esme's breath caught as Mark dropped to one knee, pulling out a small velvet box.
"Esme Williams,"
he said, his voice full of emotion.
"You are the most incredible woman I've ever met."
"Your strength, your kindness, your passion. You amaze me every day. Will you marry me?" Tears welled up in Esme's eyes as she looked at the sparkling ring, then back at Mark's hopeful face. In that moment, any lingering doubts she might have had about her choice to embrace this life vanished. "Yes," she whispered, then louder. "Yes, of course I'll marry you." As Mark slipped the ring onto her finger and pulled her into a kiss, Esme felt a sense of completion. This was who she was meant to be, who she had become through an incredible journey of self-discovery. The wish she'd made in that temple in Nepal had changed her life in ways she could never have imagined. It had given her the chance to understand not just women, but herself on a profound level. As Esme melted into Mark's embrace, she sent a silent thank you to whatever force had granted her wish, grateful for the unexpected path that had led her to true happiness. In the years that followed, Esme's life continued to flourish. She and Mark married in a beautiful ceremony, surrounded by friends and colleagues who had become like family. Esme wore a stunning silk gown that shimmered like moonlight, her auburn hair adorned with delicate flowers. As she built her career, rising through the ranks of the company, Esme never forgot the unique perspective her journey had given her. She became an advocate for diversity and inclusion in the workplace, using her experiences to foster understanding and empathy. Esme and Mark eventually started a family of their own, adopting 2 wonderful children. As a mother, Esme found new depths to her strength and compassion, drawing on the lessons she'd learned throughout her transformation. On quiet evenings, when the children were asleep and the house was still, Esme would sometimes think back to her life as Theo. She felt no regret, no longing for that past self. Instead, she felt gratitude for the journey that had brought her here, to this life filled with love, purpose, and self-acceptance. Esme's wish to understand women better had been granted in the most extraordinary way possible. Through living as a woman, she had gained insights and experiences that went far beyond her original desire. She had discovered the complexity of gender, the strength found in vulnerability, and the power of embracing one's true self. As she looked at her reflection in the mirror, Esme saw a woman who had grown into herself, who had found happiness and success on her own terms. Her auburn hair, now streaked with the occasional silver strand, framed a face that radiated contentment and wisdom. Esme smiled at her reflection, thankful for the twist of fate that had set her on this path. She had wished to understand women better, and in doing so, she had come to understand and love herself more fully than she ever thought possible.
Thanks for watching, my girlies! Be sure to check out Patreon for more!